Welcome to the Construction Brothers Podcast. I'm Tyler Campbell.
And I'm Eddie Campbell.
And this week we have Dad with us.
Hello.
Welcome, Dad. How's it going?
Hi, son. Hi, son.
Quite frankly, we have no idea where the conversation's going today. Absolutely none.
Oh, it could go anywhere.
It could go anywhere.
We've got a vague idea.
We have a little bit of an idea. I mean, I feel like this could be as close to the Andy episode as we've gotten in a long time.
That was a fun episode.
Where we shared like all of the family secret stories and everything.
And I'm the goober in all the stories.
Well,
Not all of them.
We were going to say this one was Between Two Fools. That would be the episode title.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
I think it's aptly named personally.
I think it could work.
Well, so we definitely wanted to talk through your time as a GC coming up and stuff, though, because like I almost feel like there's some gaps in my understanding there of like what you actually did growing up. Like I knew, but like
some of it you'll never know.
Off of your face.
Some of it you'll never know.
I don't need to know all of it. Okay?
Yeah, we're not looking for extracurricular activities here.
This isn't a counseling session, for the record. That's not what we want. So
it's fair. Yes.
Okay. So
I support that.
So all right, let's dig into. There's going to be a lot of giggling this episode. I already know it. Let's dig into your first job. And like, let's just kind of go from there because I think I think people would be interested what your background is because we talk about you a lot. Like you get a lot of mentions.
My very first job?
Yeah.
I worked at Kroger as a cashier.
Not that one. But construction related.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
No, my first job was as a laborer. Pop came in and woke me up after my last baseball game of the summer and said, "Get up, you're going to work." And he sent me to the Union Hall to pick up a card, and then up to Miami University to report to the superintendent that I had known. He was a friend of Dad's, and of course I walked in. His name was Morris Otto. I walked in. I said, "Hey, Mr. Otto, how you doing?" And he said, "You Mr. Otto me, you." He handed me a broom. He said, "You go take this thing. I want it moving so fast that it gets on fire. And you burn it up and bring it back, and I'll give you another one."
That's still a quote that we use to this day.
Burn
it up.
Burn it up.
Well, you had a job at a zoo too, right?
Oh yeah, Cincinnati Zoo. That was the next year. That was in '75.
Wasn't that Harambe's
It was
pen
Yep.
that you were working in?
Yep. Dad was the project manager. Morris was the superintendent again. This was the next summer after my freshman year of college.
Yeah.
That's where Mom's class ring is buried.
Her class ring is buried there because for about 2 weeks of that summer, the hottest part, they had me down in this pit where there was a large oil drum, and they bring a dump truck over and they dump what they called bank run. It was sand and gravel. They dumped that down in the hole, and then my job was to shovel it into a wheelbarrow and take it around and slowly backfill. They couldn't get equipment back in there.
Right.
So I had to backfill it all by hand, and every time I had a foot of it, I had to go around and get it tamped. Well, I had your mom's class ring on a chain around my neck, and
Oopsie.
it's somewhere there.
That's a fun family fact.
Oh, yeah. Well, if they ever dig the thing up and they find a class ring that says Kathy Harper 1976,
there it is.
that's it.
I think that's so funny because, like, when all that Harambe stuff was going on, and like that was, I mean, such an insane story. You're like, Mom's class ring's in there. I'm like,
oh yeah,
oh okay.
That was a fun job.
I remember you telling me about the camels too. That was fun.
Oh yeah, I'd walk where we parked. I'd walk by the camel pen.
Yeah,
and the camels could actually come over and lean over the fence.
Yeah,
and one of them, the male, was just real friendly. He'd come over, lean over the fence, and I'd scratch him on the head. And they have this gross thing where their whole stomach just kind of comes out. It's an affection thing.
It's a display of affection.
Yeah, it's a display of, and
here's my esophagus.
Only he just basically, he leans his head against my chest and goes, blah, and it just fall down the front of me. Well, apparently he must have done that to a little kid because they ended up putting a wire across there to keep him keep him back away from the fence.
This was the 70s, so I assume that they just shot him if they did that to a kid or something.
I hope not. He was a pretty cool camel.
He was a nice camel.
I would have taken him home, but I don't think
gosh.
we'd have gotten him in the apartment.
So, so that was a fun project. Like what specifically about that project was interesting to you, and what part of your career was that in? Was that like still pretty early on? I thought.
Oh
right?
that was my second summer. My first summer was after my senior year of high school.
Yeah.
And then after my freshman year of college, that's when I worked at the zoo. And I spent the whole summer on that project, and it was a concrete job, mostly walls and concrete decks. We were building the moat,
Yeah.
concrete walls around where the moat is, and I guess one of the cool things is even though I was a laborer, Dad gave me a set of drawings, and let me just have my own set of drawings so I could actually look at what I was building during the day. And that was pretty cool.
I mean, that matters so much. I feel like that's
yeah.
something he talks about constantly is not having.
Yeah, I wish I had
Context.
a context for what I was trying to build.
Yeah.
When I'm just laboring away, it's like, well, what's the goal though?
Right.
Oh yeah, when I'm backfilling an oil drum, it's not like I could really.
Give me some purpose
And
here,
now that-
please.
Yeah.
Now they did. Whenever we poured, we had a cherry picker and a concrete bucket. It was the kind of little nose on the front that for pouring walls, and my job was to go out there and man the bucket at the concrete truck. And the first time I did it, boy, I was Dad had taught me hand signals, so. The operators in there, and I'm doing every hand signal I knew.
Yeah.
And finally, he just hangs the bucket over my head and stops. He gets out. His name was Joe Ely. He was a great guy. We ended up being pretty good friends. He walks over to me. He said, "Look." He took a little piece of plywood. He set it down. He said, "There it is. You just stand back. I'll put the nose on that piece of plywood, and then you just turn it to face the concrete truck and nod your head, and I'll let it down." Okay. He went and got back in there, set the thing right down on that piece of plywood. I turned around, laid it down. Concrete driver, I think, was giggling.
It's just
Wait, that's it? That's all I got to do?
it's a little pat on the
Well,
head
it was kind
for
of
you.
neat, though. The people, there were people that they were kind of ornery to me just because of who I was. My dad being the project manager, so I took a little bit of guff, but a lot of people took interest in, they were good about teaching too.
Yeah.
I was pretty grateful for it.
So you start your career co-oping, like your career, right? Those are summer jobs. You
I
had.
wasn't co-oping at that time. I was just,
Right, but-
working as a laborer.
But you decide, you get to this construction path. You basically are opening the doors of the University of Cincinnati's co-op program in construction management.
That was actually a couple of years down the road because those first 2 years, I wasn't in the co-op program with Messer. I was just working as a laborer. I was not really intending to go into construction.
Yeah.
It wasn't my major. My major was business, which is a total waste of energy. But so no, that was just a summer job for me. And since when I worked on the zoo project, it was $10 an hour, union wage, which for
Jeez,
a
yeah,
19-year-old kid was pretty good wages.
Yeah.
And then the following year, I started my sophomore year back at UC, and got to the spring quarter. We were on a quarter system. Got to the spring quarter, and by then I had met this really, really, really pretty redhead,
We're familiar.
We're familiar with this one.
and I was really, really fond of her. Still am, but I decided I really didn't want to keep going to college. I didn't like what I was taking. It just seemed like a waste of time to me. So I quit going to school and just went to work full-time for Messer as a laborer. And that went for, probably 6-8 months. And they came out with a program where it wasn't actually a co-op program, but it was a program where they paid for your tuition if you took these courses, and if you got a B or better, they would pay your tuition. And it was all night classes down at what was back then was called the Ohio College of Applied Sciences. It had been bought by UC. So I started taking construction management courses there, which was the original CM courses that are now at UC on their main campus. But it was kind of a pilot program then. And I went ahead and I started taking those night classes, and then switched over and jumped into the co-op program.
Yeah. You've spoken pretty highly of the co-op program too. I feel like over the years, like that's been really good.
Oh yeah.
And like hearing what they do, especially like at Messer, like shout out. I mean, this is not intended to be the Messer show here, but you know, to be like, I mean, that's where a lot of our family came out of, and is still at too.
I
mean, to
tell
this day,
people I'm a Messer baby.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, Dad he wasn't working for him when I was born, but when he was still in college when I was born.
I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah.
I thought he was working through college with
well,
Messer and everything too.
He was.
Okay.
He was. He might have been co-oping with Messer by that time, but he co-opted and worked with his tools his first time, and that was because it paid better.
Sure. Yeah.
At co-ops, I mean, you know, they didn't make anything, and still was the case. I took a pretty good cut in pay to go into the co-op program from just working as a laborer. But he had gone through that program, and of course Messer's a different culture. He ended up retiring with them.
Yeah.
So pretty much his whole career was there.
It's funny how like our family roots go so deep into that company, and I don't know a lot of people. Actually, I don't know if people really realize how deep into that company our roots go.
Oh yeah.
I want to get us to Florida.
Okay.
Florida early 80s, because this is where the career really starts, and we get into what's it like to be a young PM. Was it really Flipper that moved us to Florida?
Flipper? What?
That had a lot to do with it.
What in the heck are you talking
You didn't know
about?
this?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I
I
had
wanted
no
to drop
idea.
this in.
Oh yeah.
Flipper?
Well, there was Flipper, and then there was Sea Hunt. These were TV shows that I grew up with.
Okay.
And-
well, I mean, I know Flipper.
And you know, I'm in Ohio in the middle of winter. I hate it. Sun doesn't shine for 4 months. It's cold. I can't go outside. And I'm watching this show with this guy who's swimming around with this dolphin, and it's sunny all the time, and it's gorgeous, and I want to be there. Well, then flash forward to the late 70s, and I'm co-op, and I'm down on a job in, it was the East Bend Power Plant in Rabbit Hash, Kentucky, right on the Ohio River.
Rabbit Hash, Kentucky.
Rabbit Hash, Kentucky.
All right.
The wind chill was 75 below. I mean, it was unbelievably cold that winter. That was the winter that the Ohio River froze, and somebody actually drove a car out on it. Yeah.
Rivers freezing is not common.
That takes something.
One that big? Oh, those were brutal winters. There were two in a row.
The Ohio River is not small.
But that's when I
reference.
made the decision. I'm out of here. So we sold everything that wouldn't fit in a 6x12 U-Haul in our LTD car that we had a hitch put on it from U-Haul, and we towed that and threw our 6-month-old baby in a little what they call a bumbo seat.
That's what happened to you.
Yeah, well,
There were no
was a-
car seats when I was.
It was a
no-
car
there
wreck
were
that
no
caused
car
your head
seats.
to be that shape.
Not at
there
all.
were no car seats. And before that though, I actually booked a flight it was my first time ever being in a jet. Booked a flight to Florida. I got down there and we were going to move to Sarasota. So I get down there, I drive from Tampa International down to Sarasota, and first thing I did was look for jobs. Well, I found 2 jobs. One was with a general contractor during the day, but then I also found a guy who was a glass sub that was offering me an estimating job in the evenings. So I had that all worked out, and then I went looking for a place to live. Well, that didn't work very well because Sarasota was, I mean, They didn't like children.
Oh,
I
it's
could
just
find some-
retirement community.
I
Basically,
could find
at that
some
time.
really nice places to
still
live,
is.
and that's when somebody said, "Well, you might want to try St. Pete. They're a little more kid friendly." Well, yeah, some places were,
Yeah.
but we literally walked into an apartment complex after we had a little adventure with our first house we rented. The palmetto bugs were a new thing for this Ohio mom.
Please, can we tell that story really quick? Just
All right.
quick sidebar.
Okay, so we get that we drive, we get to Florida. I had
so
rented
good.
a house in St. Pete.
You done good.
It had
You
been,
got a house and everything.
It was a nice
Yeah.
nice little place, had been renovated. I mean, completely renovated, new everything, new paint, new everything. So we get down there and unpack the U-Haul, get everything in, and then we go to the grocery store. We stock up on groceries. We come back, and in those days we had you had the paper bags. We set the paper bags on the counter, and I don't think Mom probably went in to feed you, and came back out, and these 4-inch palmetto bugs start flying all over the place, jumping out of the grocery bags. Of course, Mom's freaking, completely freaking
Because
out.
palmetto bugs, it's a roach.
Yeah,
it's just a roach for context.
It is.
It's a big freaking roach.
And they fly.
And they fly.
And they fly.
It's a flying big freaking roach.
That's exactly what it was. And Mom, of course, was freaking out, and then she basically told me, I'm not spending any time in this place with my baby. And so I said, well, I had to go to work the next day. I'd gotten another job up in St. Pete. And so I'd promised this guy I would be there on that day. So I had to go to bed. I went to bed, and she was still standing guard with the lights on over your crib. The next morning, I got up, and the only thing left in that house was your crib and the bed I was sleeping in. She had packed everything back into that U-Haul. Couch, chairs, dining room, everything that we owned we had gotten that I had moved out of that U-Haul, your mother moved back into the U-Haul.
Was this like a love seat couch, or was this like a 3-bay, like big couch?
That was a full-size
Holy
couch.
crap.
And I believe there was a love seat, too.
Do you remember the movie Rocket Man, where he had to
Of
lift?
course, it's a cult classic in our family.
Yes, in our little crew here. Where he goes and he has to lift the Mars rover off of the guy, and he was like, "You got to call me Mama." He's like, "Got to summon that mommy strength." That's what Mom did that night. Summoned the mommy strength and
gosh.
threw it on her back
Looking
and
over
got
me.
it done.
Looking over 6-month Eddie.
Well, we ended up finding an apartment, but when we went apartment hunting, though, we actually walked into a really nice place that a friend of mine or a guy I had just met down there, referred me to, and we walked in, and we had a Cocker Spaniel, and I'm carrying a Cocker Spaniel, and I just said, "You take pets?" And she says, "Oh yeah," and Mom comes in carrying you, and she goes, "Oh, but we don't take those." I looked at those. That's my son.
Those.
Well, so you get into the construction industry, early 80s in Florida, and, we know we dot around, and, I mean, there were multiple jobs. High level, like, you kind of worked from field to office during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I was only with one company before I went in the office. I took a job with a company that was called Federal Construction. They'd been around for a while, and just took a job as a carpenter. But they also found out that I had layout skills from my time, as a co-op, and so I did pretty well there. But it didn't look like I was going anywhere.
Yeah.
I just could not break through to the folks in the office and let them know, hey, I want to move into estimating, project management. And because I didn't have a degree in building construction, they pretty well looked at me like, nah, you'll never make it. And so I just resigned and went and visited a job site. And the guy who was my first superintendent down there was there. And he said, we're looking for somebody in our Fort Myers office. And so he called Roy Wingate, who ended up being my boss, and told him about me, and so Roy ended up setting up an interview, and we met there at the airport. He flew back up from Fort Myers. We met there, and he called me back, and well, actually, no, he set me up with another interview with one of their VPs, and after that, they made an offer to me, and had me work in the estimating department for about 3 months. There in Clearwater. We still lived in St. Pete. And then after 3 months, we relocated down to Fort Myers, which was another adventure. By then, I had a van, a work van. And so
up.
we're trying to go over the Skyway Bridge in a van that's a 3-speed on the floor,
Hey.
towing a U-Haul. Oh, my. That this thing did, and the last thing you want to do is not hit a gear.
Yeah.
Going up over that thing, and this was the old Skyway Bridge. The new one wasn't built yet.
Roll back down, start over. Yeah.
Yeah, on whoever's behind me. So that was an adventure. But we moved down there, and I was an assistant PM, and about 3 months later, they promoted me.
Mm-hmm.
So
I want to talk about Roy because you've been a mentor to us, right? In some ways, there's been a pass down.
Well, yeah.
Like you spent a lot of time with me when I've started. You spent a lot of time with Tyler when he first started, but then there was a transition where Tyler and I end up in the office, and there's a lot of throughput happening where I'm like, well, Dad's told me this, and it's just kind of I'm becoming this conduit for things I've been taught. Roy is a person that I've heard that name a lot in the context of him teaching you stuff. He was an early mentor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was a few years older than Dad, and soft-spoken, decent guy. He was trying to start up this new office, and it was he and I, one other project manager, and we had an office manager, Joanne, and that was it. And we were in this little upstairs office, and I can remember at one point your mom had gone to the doctor to find out if she was getting ready to have a baby, and we were all standing there looking out the window as she gets out and she's toting you along, and you're 2 years old, and we're all hollering down out of the window. Well. So she ended up pregnant with your little brother.
Joy,
That was years before you, though.
And then the chaos started.
That's when things got going.
That's awesome. So that office was a little smaller, a little more
Mom and
It was a
pop
satellite.
situation.
It was a satellite office of a company that was out of Clearwater.
Yeah.
So and the Clearwater company at the time, I want to say they were around $50 million a year, which was a good size. I mean, it was a top 300 company at that point, because the big guys, they're just, I think Messer was around 90 million at the time, and and they're maybe 2 or 3 billion now.
Right.
So there's really no comparison. And of course, some of the jobs. I mean, one of my first jobs as a project manager was in elementary school, and that was a $4.5 million job. Which today, I don't know that you build a school for less than 20.
No.
Yeah.
Ain't no way.
So but Roy was a mentor. In those days, we did not have. There was no email. We had no PCs, because that would have been 82, and
Like right before. I feel like
it
a couple years later
was,
is when it started hitting.
It was, because the end of '83 was when I worked on my first PC.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they came out before that, but that was my first experience. But actually, they had a mainframe, and I think it was an IBM 36 is what it was called, and we had a terminal in our Fort Myers office, and they elected me to be the guinea pig for doing all the computer stuff since I was the kid.
Yeah. It's the way it goes.
Isn't it funny how that works?
How it
Still
works.
happening today.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate. I was the kid. I was the nerd.
Yeah.
That not that I really liked computers, but
You shiny.
it was pretty cool. One of the first things they had me do was I was managing a 6-story concrete structure, Cape Coral Hospital. We were just the frame contractor, and they had the budget loaded, but then they wanted me to work on a schedule. So I worked along with the scheduler to actually plug in the schedule to the mainframe. And one of the cool things was we were able to assign man hours to all the different schedule events, and then assign some sort of pay grade to those. So by doing that, I came through and it showed the graph of the workload going up and then back. It's a bell curve.
Yeah.
In our case, it really wasn't a bell curve. It started off and it just stayed pretty much up until the end, because once you were done and the last forms were stripped, we were done.
Yeah.
That was the end of the job. But gosh, I remember plugging all those numbers in, and it's spitting out how much we thought we were going to spend on labor, because labor and materials was the deal. There was no subcontract work on it. We were the sub. And oh man, I got so pumped. I thought, we're going to make bank on this job. They're going to give me a heck of a bonus. And I'm showing it to one of the older vice presidents had come down, and Roy was just he just grinned a lot of time. I get so excited about stuff, and he just kind of grinned at me. But then this one of the VPs, an older hands-on guy, he comes down and he looks it over and he goes, yeah, it'd be neat if it works out. But I'm just pumped. I'm thinking, golly, I'm just going to really do well on this. And we made money, but we didn't make bank on labor, not by any means. But that was my first exposure to computers, and I was with them for about 2 years.
It's so funny because like the process that you're doing is something I feel like a lot of applications are doing right now in the industry. It's like, planning, right? Like planning is a big part of it. And, we talk about them like they're groundbreaking. Like they're just amazing, amazing tools. I'm like, this is a UI change, guys. Like this is user interface. That's the only thing that's changed. The back end of this, like the process, what we're trying to do, we've been doing this for a very, very long time. It's just been in other forms. It's been in other shapes and sizes. But like, I don't know, everybody gets so pumped up thinking that they're like the first ones to ever do a thing. And that's not really I'm sure even then, even when you were doing that, there was some other thing potentially back when that would do the same.
Well, that's the part that was missing about what, when those guys were smiling at me, and I didn't really understand it, that they're looking at it and saying, yeah, okay, numbers, and everything looks really rosy, but experience tells us that it's not going to work that way.
Yeah.
That it's going to, there are things that you're not accounting for. There's you can look at it and say, yeah, I can, based on my experience, I can look at a wall form and say that's going to take 3 carpenters and a laborer and a crane, and if we had gang forms, things like that, and it's going to take them 3 days to button everything up.
Yeah.
And I had a fairly decent grasp of those kind of things because I'd been around that stuff, doing concrete forms and things as a laborer and a carpenter. So I really thought I had a pretty good handle on it, but what I didn't really have the handle on is just the overall thing of, hey, it ends up taking more because there's just so many other things going on, and then you've got rain, you've got just delays and maybe material wasn't there, maybe an overtime that could happen just simply because your concrete ended up going into overtime.
Yeah.
Because it didn't get there on time, and now it just so many factors that that the older guys looked at it and went, okay, we'll see.
Yeah.
It's a great picture. Real cute.
Yeah. In fact, and I printed out, and that was on the green, the old green bar paper.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I printed out the
Green bar paper.
Oh my gosh! Now we are talking.
Teach the boy.
Green.
What is a green bar paper? Dad?
Well, have you ever seen the perforated sides?
Yeah.
Well, green bar paper was was wide, and it had green and white and green and white.
Okay.
So it's just
hence
called
the name
Green
Bar.
Bar. Yeah, real creative name.
Cool story. All right. Anyway,
I just get a kick out of the reference being a whiff on your part, so I had to call it out.
Yeah,
Hey,
there's a lot of things I don't know. I'm readily willing to admit that.
You whippersnapper.
Young whippersnapper.
Well, I think it's fun that there's a development of processes, and like you were there when computers are coming in and you're cutting your teeth in Lotus 1-2-3, early spreadsheet, preliminary Excel or whatever you want to call it. And I mean, there's all of this transition and stuff happening, but I mean, schedule analysis existed.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like people were going in just completely blind on like, oh, we'll just let the schedule happen,
Right.
Or cash analysis. I mean, like I'm sure you guys are
Yep.
doing an accounting analysis of what's going to happen throughout the process of construction. This isn't new. Like we developed some tools since.
Well, now scheduling, actually, my third quarter of construction management was scheduling. And we used a computer.
Okay.
But that computer wasn't like that IBM. So that would have been in 76, 77. And that was back in the key punch days.
Yeah, you had the card, the
You had
card stack.
Oh
and the
yeah.
whole
So
bit.
you were typing code.
Yeah.
We were learning code. And gosh, I hated computers then because it's so much nicer now, just click.
Yeah.
But back then it was type everything out, each command, and then on these ginormous typewriters, and then you'd hit enter and it would spit out this card that it had punched. And then you'd end up with a stack 2 or 3 inches thick. And that's a small stack because there were people who were programming stuff that, it'd take forever. But our little scheduling adventure, you'd go in and hand your stack to the guy in the computer room, and he'd run it through this thing and just flip out all this paper, and then you sit and wait. And about 15 minutes later, here comes the green bar paper, ka-chunk, 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 just as fast as it could go, with like a line of nothing on it, maybe a word. The basic meant you just screwed up.
You messed up.
You screwed up. You threw it into a loop, especially thinking about scheduling. It's very easy to throw something into a loop because A comes before B, B comes before C comes before A.
And now you're, what do I do?
Yeah.
Which those circular references happen all the time in Excel.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you don't have to wait 15 minutes for it to print out on a bunch of paper to find out.
Oh, yeah. And then you got dog cussed by the guy running a computer room because you've just wasted 50 sheets of green bar spitting it out until you're looking at it going, oh, can you stop this?
Well, then you got to go through each one of the punch cards too, right? And you got to find individual, like where you went wrong.
You have to find your error.
How big were these stacks? Like
ours were fairly small. They're maybe 2 or 3 inches thick, but that could be several hundred
yeah,
cards.
that's not.
Oh no! And what's even worse is I'm taking night school in the winter in Cincinnati, and I'm sorry, there's just slush everywhere.
Well, yeah.
And walking from my car to the classroom, I dropped my stack one time in the slush. Yeah. Yeah. I hated computers.
You also hated the snow, or hate the
I
snow.
hated the cold.
And still do.
And still
the
do.
things that you hate together. Oh my gosh.
I still kind of hate computers.
I'm getting a kick. I'm listening to that, and I remember when, like we first started using Tekla. It's just been some time ago. This is 20 years,
It's 20
right?
years,
So,
yeah.
I mean, cancel equals, like, I always felt like the cancel button should have just said crash.
Yeah.
Because, like, you're mid-process, and you're like, you realize, I hit that plot too soon. Like, I didn't put a rev mark in. I didn't, like, there's something on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we used to do the TIFF conversions and everything, and you're you're going, oh, man. Like, you're almost in the blind of what's going to come out. You are in the blind of what's coming out. And you go, oh, cancel. But if you didn't save before you started that process, like, you're sitting there wondering, like, oh no, what kind of gap have I created? Like, did I just add the revision marks? Is that all I'm going to lose? Or is there's like 3 hours of work that I've just gotten in the zone and forgot to hit save, and I hit cancel equals crash.
Oh my
like, you're done. We're going back to 3 hours ago.
I forgot. I feel like I remember you guys like tell me, don't hit cancel.
Don't hit
Like,
cancel.
Don't
Like,
hit cancel.
There
ever.
were certain processes that when you hit cancel, done. You're done. Like, all done. Like, just check the pockets for change. That's all we're doing at that point.
Angles are always the thing that crashed me every single time.
We learned if it's the end of the day,
Well, yeah.
just go down and get a beer.
Call it a day. We're done.
Get a beer. Yeah.
It's the running joke. Who was it, Roden, that sent that? The advanced options, this is uber Tekla nerd stuff, but it's the excess underscore crash underscore at submittal, like, you can check these advanced options, we leave them checked by default just to have fun with you.
Just to make sure that you crash.
Yeah.
Your submittals are all deleted.
It's
every
just
single
Murphy's
time.
Law. I mean, it's just going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Or you're going to feel it more when it does.
What it got better is, as obviously mainframes they were kind of a different thing. But then, I ended up, I left Enterprise, and that was hard to do. But they were getting ready to sell the company.
Yeah.
And that office we were doing well, but the company was getting sold, and things were going to change. So, and a headhunter had gotten a hold of me and introduced me to somebody that ended up working with them as a project manager. But he had an IBM dual floppy PC. So, yeah. Dual floppy.
Bussing machine.
And I had with I think a 17-inch monochrome monitor, and then
What's the price tag on that?
It was $8,000.
Cool.
Yeah, it was
Gotta get you
$8,000 of that day money.
kick butt workstation now.
$8,000 of what? My 1985 money? 1984 money?
83.
83.
Yeah, that was December of '83. I went to work for them, and he had just bought the computer, and then the printer was an Epson 20 characters per second.
20 characters.
Oh yeah, you used to have to have a box for your printer.
Yeah.
For noise.
Yeah.
But then it had to have fans on it to keep it cool. Otherwise, smoke would come out. Yeah. Well, this thing,
That's not
this
good
thing
with
would just
paper.
make this rattling noise. But see, it was a near, or they called near letter quality. So it printed some really nice. I mean, I did my letters on this.
Yeah.
It got to where I didn't even need, the days of having a secretary or office manager, whoever typing your letters. And the days of whiteout and all that were kind of going away.
Yeah.
But because I could slide an actual piece of paper or our letterhead into that printer and actually print out something that looked really nice. But boy, it was slow and loud.
So I want to get in, like, kind of fast forward a little bit, because
Yeah.
things get kind of cool when you start doing like interior finishes.
Yeah.
Like, you get in there, and I feel like that was where we went from a lot of the early days, like, and you're learning, you're getting mentored, you're getting your experience, you're cutting your teeth, and then all of a sudden you get into this mode of like being a difference maker on the team, and you're running very fast deals at a very tight clip, and you're starting to form relationships, which is something we hit incessantly. And it's I want to highlight that.
Yeah, and let's highlight this too. Everything that we say on the show is parroted.
Yeah, we parrot a lot.
We parrot this because it came from probably like Pop and you, and it's just like, and obviously our own experiences, but a lot of what we parrot is
and 90s movie references.
that too.
Don't forget about those.
Yeah, we can't forget about
Early
those.
2000s.
Of course, yes.
Although you still had the VHS tapes left over from a day in Andy's day. So you got that.
Well, they were recorded from like HBO and stuff like that.
That's right.
So they were total like
Which was
torrents
legal.
before torrents was a thing. Anyway, I mean, there's no copyright
But we digress.
issues.
That's what I was going to say, but you digress.
But of course, we always digress.
What the frick was the question?
Well, the question was, when you got into this mode and you're doing work with this developer, you're doing interior finishes, you form these teammate relationships and really friendships with people out of necessity. Like you guys were moving at such a tight clip that it just
Right.
demanded trust. It demanded relationship building, but building out of relationships. You had to have it, or you would have never gotten there with anything they were asking you to do.
Yeah.
No, and there were two sides to that. Yeah, the job that when I left Enterprise, the job that I took, they wanted me to do the interior, the tenant finish work, which was a pretty good size operation there in Tampa. Our client was Trammell Crow Company. They're still around. They were probably the biggest developer in the country at the time. And they had, their leasing agents, they paid them $25,000 a year, and then they got commissions. Now, these guys were Harvard, Stanford. These were MBA grads.
Yep.
And smart.
Yeah.
Extremely smart. Extremely aggressive.
Yeah.
They're doing deals.
Driven.
And
Yeah.
they would walk out of their office next door to ours, because one of the first things you needed to learn from Trammell Crow was that if you wanted to do business with them, you needed to lease space from them.
Yeah.
So we were in the office right next door to theirs, and their leasing agents would come out the door and immediately look over. And unfortunately, I'd moved into the front office, and they could see me. Even, a lot of times I closed the blinds and hope they wouldn't see me, but it didn't matter. They'd come over, they'd walk right past the reception. It didn't matter what I was doing. Walk in, pick up a piece of paper off of my desk. Did not matter to them what was on the paper. And turn around and sketch out something and say, I want this to go over in this suite at this park. And there were 2 or 3 parks, and then they'd leave, and 20 minutes later, I was supposed to go over to them with a printout of an estimate. And they already knew about how much per square foot it was going to run, but literally 20 minutes, come back with an estimate. And that was one of the nice things about that printer I had. I could print something out that then he'd turn around and show to his prospect.
So it took 10 minutes to do the estimate and 10 minutes to print it out, right?
Just about. Yeah, just about. Yeah, and we had everything broken down into walls, doors, carpet, ceiling, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. And the way we had it broken down was we had unit prices for everything. So, I would take that sketch and just throw some outlets on the different walls and switches, and I had unit prices that I plugged in for each one. And I think it was like $25 an outlet and $25 for a switch. And then we had so much for lighting. And so all of the unit costs that we had, we pretty well developed those over a period of time. And all of this was done in Lotus 123, version 1.
Well, in the information you were being fed, shout out to like Colwell. Chuck, who we've had on a previous show, we can reference that in the show notes. He's a bud, and you guys are working these unit prices. He's coaching you up so that you can get there without having to like wait on him.
Oh yeah. Chuck was so valuable. It made me look good.
Yeah, which surrounding yourself with good people does.
Well, yeah, and he was really patient with me, because I knew just enough to be dangerous,
right,
electrically. But he worked through these unit prices, and we knew that the unit prices on a really, really small job, he didn't do so well. But if it was a big job, he could do pretty well on those units. If you had 200 outlets in a job at $25, he was going to do a lot better on that job than he would if there were 2 outlets.
Right.
So, but we also knew after a period of time that when we got into something big, that usually that elicited a phone call. Or I'd call them and say, look, I got one here and they would give me a little more time. If it was a job that was going to be $400,000 or $500,000, then that was a pretty good sized tenant finish job at the time.
Sure.
A lot of our jobs were in the $25,000 to $50,000 range. But they happen fast.
Yeah, get it and go.
Oh, yeah, because they'd get a commitment, and one of the leasing agents, his wife was a space planner at a local architect, and she would come back and do a space plan. Sometimes it would be more than just their sketch. There'd be an actual space plan they'd bring over. But then her company would go ahead and produce 2 or 3 sheet permit set, bring them back, and then we had such a great relationship with the permit offices. Take it down, and that day we'd have a permit. And a lot of times we'd already have studs going in. I mean, we did our own framing. We did, at that time, we weren't doing drywall. We were actually doing what they called vinyl board. It was a vinyl clad drywall. And we were probably the biggest user of that in the Southeast at the time. We were just everywhere. Mm-hmm. But we did all of our own work, all of our own acoustical ceilings and doors and hardware. And we actually stocked so many doors. And we had these knockdown frames. So we had a warehouse that we would keep ahead of the stock so that we would turn a job around in 3 weeks.
Yeah, competitive advantage. Who else could you get it from that quick?
Oh, yeah. And we got into some jobs too that were pretty good size. We actually did, it was Post Buckley Shoe in Jernigan. Did I do that right? Yeah. Used to call them peanut butter and jelly.
Naturally.
They're still around. I don't think they're in the same office, but I want to say that we did that job in 8 weeks, and it was 30,000 square feet of interiors.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
But I mean, we were absolutely
getting it,
smoking it.
getting it.
Was it pretty easy to find people to do the work at that point in the career? Because we're hearing labor.
No, we were
fortunate.
We were really fortunate. Before I had come on, the guy that they called him a general foreman. His name was Bruce. Bruce was he lived in a school bus. Spent his weekends.
I know Bruce.
Picking.
Oh, Bruce.
Yep. Yeah, we all know Bruce. But he's a great guy. Good guy as far as getting the work done. He could be ornery as all get out, especially if he was hungover. Colwell can tell you that.
Well, yeah.
But
aren't we all?
he had just hired a guy, and we ended up calling them the Smurfs. We had the whole family, and we actually called one of them Mama Smurf, Papa Smurf, Baby Smurf, Smurfette. I mean, we had them all.
Didn't you have a Gargamel as well?
Oh yeah, that was he was.
He did,
yeah. That was Randy. He was actually an in-law.
Yeah,
he had actually married into the Smurf family, and they called him Gargamel. But they were awesome people. They were absolutely awesome. They would work 6 days a week. They would not work on Saturday.
Yeah,
but they would work on Sunday. And I don't remember what church it was. I don't know if it's the Worldwide Church of God or whatever it was.
That was their thing.
Saturday was the Sabbath, and they would not work on the Sabbath. But boy, starting Sunday, it was
get it.
Oh yeah, pedal to the metal. They were so good at everything, so talented, and such great people that. At one point, one of the other VPs, he was down for our Christmas party. He just kind of whispered in my ear. He said, "You'd be screwed without those Smurfs."
Yeah. Well, and that's,
he was right.
You got Colwell, you got How to Shell, which How to Shell was on the plumbing side of things.
Yeah.
So you get your electrician, you got your plumber, you got the people that are doing your installs. Like this whole thing was a relationship driven system, and we spent so much time on the cast here talking about we've got to build relationships. It's about people.
Yeah.
A lot of construction is about people. It's about who you surround yourself with,
it's
how you work,
all of
stuff.
It's all of it.
Yeah, right.
It's not some of it. I feel.
But it's like this was Forged in Fire. Like this was proven beforehand, so we didn't come by this by accident or something. We've been hearing these stories since we came in,
right?
And these guys are still friends. Yeah. We were talking yesterday about that. These guys are those are your still your ride or die buddies.
Yeah.
Like there's still,
Oh yeah.
and you're still doing stuff and still in contact with Colwell, and you're still in contact with How to Shell.
Chuck sent me a text last month. It was a picture of his granddaughter with a giant teddy bear that we'd bought for his son back when he was a little guy. So
Another whole cool story, but I mean, it's cool how mentorship, this relationship driven building, like just the acknowledgement of the fact that people are the thing that make us successful. Like we're surrounded by a good group and all of a sudden we look good. Surrounded by a group of people that are knuckleheads. Well, all of a sudden it can make you look like a knucklehead in a real hurry.
Right.
So you're kind of the product of those people that are close to you.
Oh yeah. Well, we had our carpet guy was in Atlanta, and they're owned by Shaw now, but at that time it was a company called Bell Man. They supplied all of our carpet. When Trammell Crow gave carpet samples to their prospects, they were picking out of the standard Bell Man catalog that they actually had prepared a catalog just for Trammell Crow. And anytime somebody wanted something different, then we had to do a little bit of shopping, but Bell Man always did it for us. And we really never went outside of using them because we could count on them. We knew that when the guy's name was Larry Jones, when Larry would call me and tell me a schedule, he meant it, and they would meet it because he knew that all of those things, you've run into this now where you're made to look like a fool or a liar based on passing on information from somebody else.
Correct.
Yeah.
They tell you, I'll be there Monday, and then they don't show, and then you look like an idiot because you passed it on to your client. But the people that we dealt with, they were always upfront, and I expected them to make money because it didn't work if they didn't.
Sure.
Yeah.
At one point, Chuck Colwell invited me to come and sit down with he and his partner after work one day, and they proceeded to feed me a couple of drinks and tell me how bad Bruce was treating them, that he was just beating on them time and time. And, and I said, look, he's my guy. I got to stick with him, but, let it simmer a while and then we'll revisit.
Yeah.
Never had to, because eventually Bruce became a believer too.
Yeah.
And he saw that they were team players, and that from the standpoint of being able to go to the next level, Chuck was absolutely responsible for that.
Yeah.
Because there were other electrical contractors that we could have been using that didn't have somebody like Chuck that was there, that was running the show. And that made a huge difference, especially when we got into some jobs where the electrical was as much as the rest of the job.
Sure.
Well, I mean, moral of that story, find you a Chuck, find you somebody like that can help you level up, right? Like,
Well, we had
find
to.
people that are better than you.
We had to. We didn't price them out, but
Yeah.
the reason we didn't need to.
Yeah.
We knew they shared enough with us that we knew that they would make more on bigger jobs than on smaller ones, but we also knew that Trammell Crow was going to tighten us down a little bit on jobs that were bigger because they knew we had more in it. And we made good money as a company on that work, but the big thing was that you could count on everybody. We used the same team all the time. We knew the numbers, and even when we went to refine them, when the actual job started, I would go back and redo the estimate and break it out into its components and put it into Lotus, because I wanted to then track those costs and be able to feed back to our unit costs. So, and at the time, we had a mainframe in Atlanta because that's where the headquarters was. This was another satellite office in Tampa, but we had a mainframe in Atlanta, and that was a Wang mainframe. But what would happen is we would get our cost reports once a month which if you're running a big job, that wasn't bad. But I could be done with 5 jobs in that time, and if I had a hole in my estimate, either high or low, I wouldn't know about it until there were 4 other jobs that were going.
Yeah.
So what I started doing was importing my labor and actually taking the time cards that we had and putting the hours and everybody's wage in there, because labor is the biggest thing you're tracking at the time. So I'm tracking the labor, and I already had it. When I would approve invoices, I'd go ahead and plug those in for different jobs, and I would keep them in different job numbers. But the crazy thing is the machine that I had only had, what is it, 650K of memory. So we had back then F9. Do you know what F9 is?
I mean, like, is that a function key? Like,
It's a
what?
function key, but
Okay.
F9 was manual recalculation. Because when you're using Excel, or back then it was Lotus, every time you hit enter, it recalculates everything on the in the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Well, when you've got that much information and you've only got 650K, you'd hit enter and go to lunch because it would take 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So what you had to do is you'd have to put it on manual recalculation, do all of your entry, and then hit F9 and then go to lunch. But you also had to remember to hit F9 because you could change a couple of numbers in an estimate. And if you didn't hit F9, they didn't calculate over.
Yikes.
Yeah. So
Yikes.
there were a lot of things that were
not good.
It was different, but it was different, but the same. And the thing that is the same is that the formula for being successful is the relationships that you build, because without Chuck Colwell on the electrical, without Jim Wilson on HVAC, without Bob Hadashell on plumbing, and Larry Jones on carpet, we ended up subbing out some of our bigger acoustical jobs, but that was Lloyd Marvin. You've met Lloyd. And all of these guys have been friends through the years. I mean, I've lost touch with a few of them. Our sprinkler guy, there was a guy named Seckman that did our sprinklers. All the sprinkler guys I ever dealt with are all dead, though. They all died like in their 40s. There must be something about that trade.
Not so hot.
No.
Okay.
But we dealt with
Tyler.
we dealt with the same ones on every job. And
That felt like a megaphone question.
In a way.
Answer,
Yeah.
Like that the relationships make you successful.
Yeah.
oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to go into this right now, but I think we probably need to regroup and like come back to the table in a future episode, like down the line, and talk through, okay, relationship, built the team, everything's really great, hunky-dory. Let's move forward into where the wheels started to come off as far as like team goes, and especially like the reason why ABSI was even started in the first place, because the story behind that is less about ABSI. It's more about like the friction in the relationship.
Just going to have this European ending to this podcast.
I kind of do want. I kind of do, because I we could go into this, and I think we probably did like probably another 2 hours worth of, which is fine. I'm okay with that, but I kind of want to make it digestible for everybody too. You know.
Well, there was another side to that that time. We just talked about tenant finish. Mm-hmm. They knew that I had done buildings.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was the tenant guy. Well, a few years down the road, I ended up running the whole office. Mm-hmm. And so I was in charge of a couple of what we called the shell division too, which ended up being a few build-to-suits where they'd gone out and they did, a whole building for somebody. But it was very much the same. Colwell did, he did our electrical. Jim Wilson did our mechanical. Until some of the jobs that were bigger and more technical, then Bob Hadashell had worked for a company who did mechanical as well, so did plumbing and HVAC. Mm-hmm. So, but we used a lot of the same subs. Now, a lot of our jobs were tilt up.
Yeah.
We did our own panels. So all of that was in-house. then we used the same subs for finishing concrete and for all of the different. It was very much the same. It was just on a different scale.
Right. Yeah.
And the funny thing is that Trammell Crow, they knew all our subs as well as we did.
That's not a bad thing.
And you know, the guy that was the managing general partner for Trammell Crow at the time, his name's Gary Harrod. He owns Harrod Properties in Tampa, and Chuck still does work for him.
Yeah.
40 years down the road, he still does work for the guy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's his sons
Yeah.
that have taken it over. Gary's, I think, 2 or 3 years older than me, but I think he's probably still involved in some way.
Yeah. Trust transcending generations.
Oh,
everybody.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Relationships.
Yeah.
That was poignant, Tyler.
Thank you.
Trust transcending generations.
I have my moments, everybody.
Very few of them, and that's why I'm calling this one out.
All right, you already had your megaphone, so we're going to cut it off here, but we're going to come back to the table and we're going to talk through the kind of the ABSI years and some of those interesting things, because I think that's where we let the hair down a little bit. You know what I mean?
Can we retain the two between two fulls? I mean,
We could probably retain that.
I love it.
I think it works.
I still
out pretty
think
well.
stuck in the middle with you.
Nice one too.
Steelers wheels. Yeah.
You guys are reversed though, because it should
It was
be
hilarious.
It should be clowns to the left and me jokers to the right, and
It is actually reversed,
We've got
yeah.
to reverse, because if we were going to do clowns and jokers, yeah.
I mean, I have my
it's
moments. I have my moments, but I am more of a
What's the
clown than
T-shirt we
anything.
bought you for Christmas?
I don't even know. What's the T-shirt you bought me for Christmas?
Oh, it was something
Oh, you are a bad
like an
son, sir.
instigator.
Oh yeah, you are the instigator.
Yeah.
You're constantly just poking the bee's nest just to get other people stung. That's what you do.
It's the only thing I ever got in trouble for in school was just.
Being the
I think this was the only call you ever got, and it was my senior year, and it was Eddie doesn't do anything, but he instigates it. Like
yeah.
I know he's behind it all. It's like, the kid in The Incredibles. Like the teacher is there, and like I know he's putting the tacks under my chair. I just can't catch it. I know. Did you see he moved? Like I know. Yeah.
Oh, I laughed so hard at that gal. I kind of felt bad about it afterwards, but she called and she starts telling me, and you're a week from graduating high school. First call I ever get on you. And it's, he's instigating.
I want to say it was Miss Pinion. Like, shout
I
out
don't
Miss
know who
Pinion.
it was, but
Yeah.
she's telling me all this, and you could tell she was
apologize.
frustrated, and I start
Sorry.
laughing.
Look at the camera and apologize.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
I am
You're a
not
freaking
sorry.
liar.
I am not
You are
sorry.
a
I was
freaking
having
liar,
fun.
sir.
I'm still an instigator to this day. It serves me well sometimes.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us this week. We'll be back soon with another episode. Don't forget to rate and review the show. Give us 5 stars if you would. Mama said if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? Yeah, that's what she
Can't
said.
rate it good. And don't rate
I don't
it
remember
rate it
her
at
ever
all.
saying that.
Maybe it was Dave Ramsey's mama. I don't know. Anyway, have a great week, guys.